Hey there, YouTube. Welcome back to Atlantic City. Today, I wanted to talk to you about the club CBGB's in New York. Certainly, if you're of a certain age, one of the most famous clubs in the world. Who became known. Oh, this is awesome. Jeez. One of the most famous clubs in the world. Who became famous for bands like the Talking Heads and the Cars, who emerged out of that club. What I want to discuss with you today is how it got to that point, how that really happened, because it wasn't accidental. The first generation of bands that was in CBGB's was a whole slew of local punk rock bands. Now, this is 1975. This is really before the punk rock movement had its big push with the Sex Pistols, which would have been 78. So this is a couple years before. And the bands that sort of rose out of that mass of garage bands and punk rock bands and all that kind of stuff were the Ramones, Patti Smith, and the band that we're listening to behind us, which is Television. And those three bands sort of attracted the attention of every record executive in the country. And on any given night, the place would just be full of A&R guys from record labels, just checking out what the whole scene was. And you had, and there was a little bit of variety in there. Like the Ramones were sort of that machine gun guitar, sort of punkish, 2.5-minute songs, and just banged out instantaneous, one after the other, which was, very punkish. Patti Smith, who I hope that you guys know from her album Heavy Horses. Again, she was a little bit more punkish in her younger days. And this band, Television, local New York guys. Now, if you have never listened to Television, if you didn't know any better, this is a band that you would think came out of the 80s in Britain. Truth be told, they were formed in 1973 in New York City. Here, as a matter of fact, here, I'll show you this. That's the cover of the Marquee Moon album. They even look like a British band. If you didn't know any better, you would swear that that's where these guys came from. That's the kind of influence that they had. Yeah. Now, by the time this album had been recorded in 1977, their original bass player, Richard Hell, had left the band and formed his own group, Richard Hell and the Voidoids, who were also a staple at CBGB's. So it was all of these bands that were happening at CBGB's in 75, 76 that drew the attention in of all these record people. And all of these bands were signed, and all of them went on to have, very good careers. Including Richard Hell and the Voidoids. Varying degrees of success, but they all did things. So by the time that the Talking Heads or the Cars walked into CBGB's, they had the laser focus of the entire record industry on this beat-up dirt hole of a club in the middle of New York. So the promotion and the interest was already there, and that's one of the reasons that the Cars, for me, that the Cars and the Talking Heads shot out so big, so fast, was because there was already this laser focus on this club. They were in the right place at the right time, and that means a lot in the music business. It just does. You have to be seen by the right people, sometimes even in the right place. So that's just kind of how it all went down. It was the Ramones and Patti Smith and television that sort of set the table for what became round two that came out of CBGB's, which was the whole new wave movement in America. The new wave movement was launched from CBGB's. So, like I said, I just figured I would give you a little bit of discussion today on how that whole thing went down. Everybody's heard of CBGB's. It was just one of those things that was just in the culture, Everyone's heard of them. But what actually happened there sort of happened in two phases. And the club never changed. It never really changed its MO. It was always a punk club. It always had a bunch of local garage bands. And it got to the point that the club was as famous as the acts that were playing in it, even more so. And out-of-town punk bands would always come and play in New York at CBGB's. Sort of a rite of passage. So you would have seen people like the Buzzcocks playing there, and and all of the other punk acts of the time. But like I said, television for me was always a little bit more melodic than some of the punk acts. And if you're paying attention to this behind me, when's the last time you ever heard a 10-minute punk song? This was a really, they were really their own animal. They really were. And they were really good. Tom Verlaine was their principal songwriter. And he also helped Patti Smith write some of her early stuff. They all kind of worked together, in that group. And like I said, I just thought I would give you a little bit of background on CBGB's. And if you've never heard the band Television before, again, yeah, here we go, huh? Come on. If you've never heard Television before, these guys had a huge influence for me on what came out of Britain in the 7 to 10 years that followed. Guitar work, very British, and even the look of the band. I think they were a very influential band that just sort of didn't get as much respect as they may have gotten. But hopefully I have excited you a little bit about checking out the band Television, which you can find on YouTube. I'll even try to leave you a link if I can. I'll leave you a link to the Marquee Moon album, so you can check that out if you're unfamiliar. And well, anyway, that's about all I got. But I just figured, yeah, a little television today and a little discussion about CBGBs might be just the thing. They really are awesome. Good Lord. They were a band that really was ahead of their time. And if you listen to that album, I think you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And well, listen, guys, thanks for sitting through. I hope you enjoyed. And I will see you all soon back up on the boardwalk. Have fun, gang.